Hey guys, so I am going to make a boutonniere today. There's so many different ways to make boutonnieres, and everybody that's been doing this for any period of time or has had to make a bunch of boutonnieres always kind of develops their own secret sauce and how they make them. So I'm going to teach you how we do it here at Amy Burke Designs. You may already know some of the things, you may not know any of them. So I'll try to take it slowly and answer all the questions that I would normally answer if it was a person that I was teaching from scratch. I think that it is important to say, just from the very beginning here, that there are some things that make really great boutonnieres and there are some things that make really poor boutonnieres. Things that make really great boutonnieres are things that do well without water, that tend to be really sturdy flowers. So roses, calla lilies, some garden roses, ranunculus, different types of foliages, those types of things usually do really well without water. Things like helleborus, anemones, sweet peas, lilac. Basically, if it looks really delicate, it probably is not going to do so hot without water, and it's probably not going to do very well as a boutonniere. Now there's different tricks and things you can do to make them last a little bit longer. I'll show you when we get started, but you close off the ends of the stems with the floral tape. That helps keep them hydrated. Or sometimes we'll even just keep the stems long, and when we deliver them to the bride, I just clip them right before we pin them on. But if this is something that you're making just for a photo shoot or a really fast thing, then it'll probably be okay. But most flowers, even sturdy flowers, after like an hour or two, unless it's just straight foliage, it'll start to get a little soft. So if you are making this for your own wedding or for a friend's wedding, it might be a good idea to just go ahead and make two of whatever it is you're making, and then halfway through you can always switch it out. All right, are we ready to get started? Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is make sure that you have all of your tools. That's going to include a snip that's strong enough to cut sturdy stems like this. You're going to need a ribbon scissor. You're going to need a wire clipper. Now, sometimes people will cut the wire with their snips, but it really damages the blade. So I always try to use a wire cutter to make sure that we don't damage the tools. Okay, also, along with those things, you're going to need boutonniere tape. This boutonniere tape, you can get it from Michael's, you can get it from a floral supply place, but it's not sticky, but it sticks to itself. Okay, so you don't want to be using sticky tape like duct tape or gift wrapping tape or any of those kinds of things. This stuff is designed to hold stems together, and it has elasticity to it, and it's waterproof. Okay, so that you're going to need wire. So the floral wire, usually this is the stuff that we buy. It's like in this 18-inch long piece. I usually cut it up into thirds when I'm doing boutonnieres. As far as the thickness goes, I think this is like a 20 gauge. Definitely different types of flowers, you need thicker or thinner wire, but I generally use something that's like about a 20 gauge, some 22 gauge, something like that. Okay, you're gonna need pins, you're gonna need ribbon. We're using black today because most of our boutonnieres for the men will do it in black because they're usually wearing a black tuxedo or a black suit. And then you're going to need all of your flowers and foliages that you want to use. So today I'm going to make a boutonniere of ranunculus. Do those. Maybe we'll try a little head. And I'm going to put some jasmine with it. So this is something that we make all the time with these ingredients. You could definitely do things that are different colors or different types of flowers. Maybe in a different video we'll go over some quick different examples of things you can do because you wire everything differently. Okay, so first things first, you're going to cut your wire. Make sure you don't cut your fingers. Okay, so it's important that depending on what type of flower you have, you wire it differently. So the point of wiring the flower is going to make it so that when the head starts to get a little bit soft, the stem stays nice and sturdy. With ranunculus, you can see the stem is the same all the way up into the flower. If you were to do a garden rose, these that I have here, they have what's called a rose hip. See that little bump there? If you do a garden rose, or any sort of rose, you always want to wire it through the hip. So all of these mechanical types of things, you're trying to make it just look like an effortless boutonniere being made and not show all of the instrumentation of how you do it. So we do this rose here, so we'll very gently poke this through the rose hip. With roses and garden roses, right here in between the hip and the stem, and then after the first knuckle, is going to be the most delicate part of the rose. So every time there's a joint, it's going to want to break. Same thing with a boutonniere. If you don't wire it and you just pin it on someone, chances are pretty good that it's going to break off at this little junction between the hip and the stem, and then you're going to have a boutonniere with no flower. So okay, so we have that poked through. Then you're going to bend it down. This is called a hairpin. You're going to kind of just loop that wire over. So now it's nice and sturdy. Okay, so now you're going to take your floral tape, move those little guys out of the way. You're going to hold it with one finger so it's still, and then you're going to slowly turn the flower. So this tape stays nice and tight and it goes all the way down. So now look at that. Okay. All right. Now with something like a ranuncula, because we don't have that hip, you're going to do a hairpin through the face of the flower. I know that sounds a little scary, and it can be depending upon what type of flower you're working with, but there's really not a way to go through the stem of a ranuncula and not make it weaker. Okay, so you're going to look right for the center of the flower. You're going to enter the flower on both sides of the center with the wire, and you're just going to slowly push it through. Be very, very gentle. And then you're just going to, while you're holding the wire, holding the head with one hand, you're going to pull that wire down until you can't see it any longer. Okay, now once that's through, you're going to cross the wires again. You're going to twist it on itself. Okay, now that should be through the head. You're going to just straighten this out a tiny little bit, straighten the head out onto the wire. Again, you're going to support the end of the tape with one hand while you gently turn the flower. And this boutonniere tape, it's important that you're coming down at an angle and that you get it nice and tight. Okay, good. So now we have two different flowers and they're both taped. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my foliage. I'm going to just kind of trim it up a little bit. Okay. So you're going to kind of place the foliage where you want it. Okay. I tend to like to stack things along that right side, because when you pin this on the person that's wearing it, this is going to be on the outside of the lapel. If you have it on this side, then it's going to be going towards their face, which I think most people don't really like flowers in their face. You also don't know anything about this person you're pinning it on. They might be allergic to it. Who knows? Okay, so I'm going to put it on like that. All right, so as I've been putting these on, I'm like supporting it with the one hand, okay? Making boutonnieres gives your fingers a workout, so just be prepared to be a little sore if you haven't done this before. Okay, so you gently take this tape, go around at the top, right underneath the bloom. Okay, now it can be pretty normal that things shift a little bit when you pull it tight. Just try your hardest to not let it move around. Great. So now we're going to put a little accent of a baby ranunculus head in there. Or should we do that one? Let's do this. All right. So when you are putting on accents, usually you're not going to need the accent flower to be wired, because you already have that center flower that's going to be supporting the brunt of the weight that this boutonniere is going to be holding. Sometimes if I have an accent that's going to be really, really long, I'll wire it. It kind of just depends on what it is. So it's important that you're always taping over the end of the stem that you're wiring on. Otherwise, you end up getting kind of a lumpy, bumpy effect that nobody likes. All right, we're going to put on a little bit of hawthorn, mix in a little bit of a bright green. All right, so you see how I'm just supporting this again, keeping it in the same place. All right. You also want to make sure that when you're taping things, you're always taping all the way to the top, because once you're done with this boutonniere and you're starting to wrap it, it's going to be a lot cleaner. Okay. So if you need to do any trimming, this is the point where you do it. Okay. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the stem the desired length that you want it. You can use your wire cutter or you can use your snip. It just depends on how sturdy your snip is. I always take a little bit of the tape and I wrap over that stem again, because this floral tape is designed to help keep the wetness in the bottom of the stems. Okay, there we go. So now, here we go with the wrap. Move everything out of the way. Okay, So with this ribbon is like a whole animal unto itself. It wants to do its own thing. It wants to not do what you're telling it to do. Just know going in that that might happen to you. So don't get frustrated. You can always start over again. I'm going to make it look easy, but it's only because I've made about 10,000 boutonnieres. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have a nice, clean, straight edge on your ribbon. If you're using satin like this, it's going to want to really ravel at the ends, and that's going to show through the bottom of the boutonniere. So we're going to cut it nice and straight. We're going to load it on the end. I always have a little bit hanging off the edge there. We're going to push that down, and then you can hold it down easily. Okay? Now you want to make sure that you're not moving your fingers around right when you're getting started, because that is going to make the satin run. Okay, so now you're going to do one full turn to where you have the ribbon that where you started is like fully underneath the ribbon that you have on the roll. After you do that, you're going to tilt the ribbon up, and you're going to go up at an angle. If you do not have this ribbon going up at an angle, what will end up happening is it'll get lumpy and bumpy. It won't look like it's nice and straight the way it's supposed to. So I'm turning this. You can see the angle that my ribbon is at. Once you get to the top and you're at the back, there's a big thorn right there. Once you get to the top and you're at the back, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to leave about 6 inches of ribbon on the end. You're going to take it, you're going to wrap it around one more full turn, and then you're going to want to push that ribbon underneath into a simple little loop. You see that? So I just turned it around and then I tucked it up underneath that loop that I did. You're going to want to pull, so hold the stem really easily. Don't hold the loop that you just made though. And you're going to want to just pull this up, and then you make that nice, clean little closure. Okay? Now, if you're pulling it and it's not at the back, you end up pulling it here, then this knot is going to be in the front, and that's not what we want. Okay, so nice little diagonal cut, and there you go. Voila, your own boutonniere.